Henry Michael.
Henry Michael Salerno. Right. And the Michael was from whom? Where did that come from?
The week I was born, my cousin died.
Aha.
And he was the only son of my father's oldest surviving brother. And he had an appendicitis attack. And he was the apple of their eye out. And he was going to become a doctor. And he was, they come from this, for those days, a very comfortable family.
He must have been a teenager or something.
17. And he was being pampered and developed him into this wonderful product of
and you inherited the mantle.
And he went to the hospital, had appendicitis, and he was operated on. And my mother was about to give birth, that was ready to come to the same hospital, as a matter of fact, within a week of that. And the operation was successful. He called home to come and pick him up. And my aunt went there with all the presents for all the nurses. And when she got to the floor, they all were looking at her. He had died from the time she received the phone call to the time that she arrived with all these gifts for the whole floor. And it was a blood clot. They must have been traveling in those days, 1942. And he died. So there was this tremendous upheaval in the family. And so I was named after my father, the first name, and Michael after my cousin. And she gave birth within like a week from that time. And it was a very disruptive time for everybody.
Very, it sounds like.
Yeah.
What is Salerno is Italian?
It's a place. Yeah, it's south of Naples. Yeah, okay. The Battle of Salerno.
All right. Yes. Yeah. And was your father?
They came from that vicinity.
Now, when you say they,
well, both my grandparents on my father's side came from there, and pretty close. My grandparents on my mother's side,
really,
pretty. Yeah, they met here. But
was your father born here? Or
yes,
he was.
So was my mother, and 3 grandparents were born there.
The previous generation. It was the previous generation that was born there. Your father's.
My father's both of his parents
were born.
And one of my mother's parents
were born there.
Were born in that vicinity, Naples, just south of Naples.
Have you ever been?
No. It's one of my big plans, though.
Is it? Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Great. Oh, yeah.
I go with my daughter probably next year.
Oh, terrific. Do you have any siblings? Are there any brothers and sisters?
I have a sister who's a teacher at Herrick's High School.
And she older?
She's a biology teacher. She's 6 years younger.
So you're the firstborn of the family.
Right. I really wasn't. It never made an impression on me being the oldest. Looking back on it now, it was a very conventional for the 40s and 50s. Mm-hmm. And my father worked. Mm-hmm. He was a store owner. He was a meat market owner. And my mother stayed home.
Okay.
And we were very lucky. All the years that I can remember, we never wanted for anything. He was very comfortable existence.
He owned his own business.
He owned his own business, and it was like, doesn't everybody live this way? I mean, on our part, I mean, we had family members that didn't do as well as we did. We had family members who did better than we did.
Wow! During the 40s
and the 50s
and the 50s, but during the 40s, if your father was in the meat business, he was a very important man.
Yeah, but he got into it later than the late 40s.
Oh, he did. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. I had visions suddenly.
There were relatives who were in it that were very important.
Yes. Okay.
And he was towards the end. But so we were very comfortable those years, and right through the 50s, and you become unconscious of anybody who isn't like that.
That's correct. Yes.
We pretty much lived in a neighborhood that was like a New Hyde Park in Herrick's. And they were all like us. Yeah. And you grow up with a feeling that, the people who aren't like that, and there's a sense, we're a very conservative area.
And when you were growing up, I assume that that's where Hank took hold. I mean, you were
right.
Hank early on as a nickname.
Fairly early.
Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm.
And
where are you living now?
Hop Hog.
And who's home with you? Who's
just
living?
my wife.
Your wife and yourself. Okay. You have children.
Right.
And
27 and 28.
Tell me about them.
Oh, they're very autistic. And one is working for the Museum of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and the other works for the.
You mentioned a daughter, right?
Right, both daughters.
Oh, both daughters. Okay.
And the other works for the New York Public Library.
Names:
Elizabeth for the museum, Jennifer for the New York Public Library. She works in the Bronx.
Really? Okay. Yeah. It's a commute every day.
She lives in East Village. They both live in East Village at this point.
Oh boy, that's got to be great though. It gives you an opportunity to get into where I'm sure you enjoy going.
It's more than interesting.
Yes, yes,
it's an adventure.
I'll bet. The personalities and the, as you say, the artistic interests of both daughters. Is there anything in either one of them that you recognize as having been a family trait, having seen it before?
Yeah, they get that from my wife. I can't do anything autistic.
Is that right?
My wife is very autistic. She's very.
Now, your wife's name?
Skilled.
Your wife's name is?
Rosemary.
Okay. What's her maiden name?
Grant.
And you say it came from the same part of her mother's side of the family came from?
Both of my sets of my grandparents came from Italy.
Yes.
Hers come from Northern Ireland.
Oh, I see. Okay, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The Catholics from the north of Ireland.
Yes. All right.
Survivors.
Exactly. So her interests though are creative.
Yeah, she's very creative, extremely. Can do anything.
Give me an example.
Oh, you name it: knit, paint, craft. She's a miniaturist. She makes dollhouse miniatures.
Really?
Oh, yeah. She's extremely good. But very modest, and she doesn't want to ever, show her stuff. Although she sends it all over the country. They trade. She makes hats. Milliner.
Really?
Miniature, 1-inch scale, 1890s.
Oh my God.
19.
That's unusual. That's very unusual.
They look like they're this big, and they're incredibly detailed. You look at them, you don't believe that they could be.
Does she do this as a hobby or as commercial?
No, not commercial. She's very uncommercial. She gives them away.
Ah.
I say, well, if you're going to give them away, save one of every batch you make.
Yeah, right.
And we'll make a collection of it for an heirloom. Because they're incredible. And she can draw and paint and sew. I mean, what if she puts her mind to it? Involves manual dexterity and skills she can do. And the kids have picked it up from her.
Do I detect a little bit of envy on your part? Wish you had some of that?
Oh, she's a computer buff too. She's extremely good with computers. Really, a whiz.
And you have distanced yourself from that.
Takes manual dexterity to get it done. But the kids are both that way.
Where were you born?
Bronx.
Where? Where in the Bronx?
Flower. What? I can't even
Flower
remember.
Hill? No, that's it.
Flower Hospital.
Okay.
Yeah. Can't even think of where it was.
And when would that have been?
1942.
Mm-hmm. So right in the middle of hospital. In the middle of WW2.
Right.
Yeah. What are your earliest memories growing up?
I actually remember a blackout.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I remember. And I remember, this is another thing I remember. We used to summer in Rockaway. Now I was born in 42, so 43, 44, 45.
Mm-hmm.
You don't remember too much that early.
Mm-hmm.
We used to go to the beach almost every single day in Rockaway. And we would stay there. I mean, because I didn't have to go to school, we would stay there until October. And my father worked, and it wouldn't matter if he would commute to the Bronx or if he would commute to Rockaway. It wouldn't matter. As long as the weather held out, he just kept the rental as long as he could.
Right.
I remember there being there'd be chickens floating in from the ocean, all along the ocean, on the beaches, chickens, all fully dressed, plucked, all, and remember to this day, and asked my mother what caused that. I asked my father. I was just a little kid. I mean, and they were talking about it. Submarines.
Yes.
They probably hit a ship.
Yeah.
And because we were at Rockaway Beach, it's the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
And a U-boat probably scored.
Sure.
And it washed all these chickens.
And the cargo. Yeah.
Cargo was chickens for the boys over there.
Wow.
And that's all I remember. That was it. And I heard on cable, they did a show on the U-boat infiltration of North Atlantic coastal waters. Incredible. 400 some odd cargo ships went down from New Orleans through Maine. And they had one couple on there who was they were on a Ferris wheel. I don't remember where it was, if it was Rockaway, if it was Coney Island, or it was New Jersey. It might have been Jersey. And they actually saw a ship blow up.
Yeah. During the daytime.
During the daytime.
Mm-hmm.
And it was all hush-hush.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's how close they got.
Yeah.
But
I believe
that's the only memory of that. And I remember Mom pulling the shades down.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it.
Were you listened to the radio when you were a kid?
We had television very early.
You did? Okay.
Oh, we had television in the 40s.
All right, so
47.
Your first memories would be of television then.
Television, I had television 47 or 48.
Okay, then you were a Foodini.
We still have it.
You were a Foodini lucky pup.
Absolutely.
Lucky pup.
Oh, sure. Howdy Doody. Yeah. Foodini, right.
And just this year, we just saw the sad demise of
Buffalo Bob, right?
Well, before we leave this period, memories of your mother as a child. Tell me about your mom. What you remember of her?
Oh, Mom's still alive. Mom was 86.
God bless. What memories do you have of her in this?
Mom
period?
never got angry. Never saw my mom get angry. Saw my father get angry, big time. With me very often. 90% of the time was with me, but never saw Mom get angry. Mom always took tried to take the positive side of a problem that went up. That came up. She would always try to make peace.
That's, you referred to the ancestry and the history of both your mother and father's families being Southern Italian, and then the Irish. I assume Grant is at the north or the
north,
south?
Yeah,
north of Ireland.
Yeah. Donegal, I think.
Donegal. Okay. Have you ever given your interest in books and history? Have you spent any time looking at the history of either family or both families?
Yeah, we spoke about it. I spoke about it to my father when he was alive. My father died 7 years ago, and he was very funny about it. He said, "Look, we were all peasants. We were all illiterate. There's probably nothing about us prior to what I can remember from who came here. And if they came here, we knew who they were. Prior to that, it's probably just illiterate peasants." He said it was very. My father comes from a family of red hair and blue eyes. All right. So there's a lot of mixing of the bloods in southern Italy with 25 different conquests.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he had no family pride about what went on before they came here. To them, they were just poor as dirt. No one cared about them. He did have a grandfather. He does recall wanting to be a priest, and he said he was kind of a troublemaker, and didn't become a priest finally. But there was a family legend about it. Some almost priest that was a little bit of a troublemaker, being the intellectual of the family, and then he didn't go through with it. So then he became, just another one of the characters in the family.
Were the Grants on your wife's side, were they Roman Catholic or
Protestant?
Catholics? They're Catholics in the north. Oh boy.
Yeah,
oh,
Catholics.
boy.
Yeah.
So there's a story there, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, but once again, they do have relatives over there, but they did keep touch with them. But they it was very, very thin lines of communication, especially when the older group, the first generation born here, dying off. they made one visit over there, and they were bar owners. Naturally, that's the big shots if you're going to be a big
okay, sure.
Catholic bar owner in Northern Ireland.
Wow.
Now, what do you think happened to that bar? Very soon after, they visited, blown up. It was in Belfast. They blew it up. And so we figured that we probably don't want to have any more contact because who knows? They blew up the bar. They couldn't have been too happy on either side.
Yeah.
So, and the name is Grant, so it's a Scotch name. So there must have been some intimate. I mean,
it's funny how very often identity of a family is not really nailed down until they come here and see that they have an identity before.
Yeah. Oh, no, but there's more of an identity with my wife's people than there is with my father. Really was emphatic about it. I said, well, they know, little illiterates, just dirt poor, came over here to make something of themselves. It's almost like there's nothing before that. When the first group came over, it was...
Well, there was the area, as you said. You took your name from the area.
But my father was not big on, going back and looking looking up nothing at all. Just there were...
Sure, there are a lot of people like that.
It was just... My grandmother, on the other hand, on my mother's side, was born here in 1885.
Oh, wow.
And went back there. And then came back here. So there was more connection on my mother's side. And then even that stopped. I think the World War II probably
She was
wiped
born
it
here
all
in
out.
1885. That means her parents were already here.
Yeah, that's right.
And
she was a citizen, right, by birth.
And probably had been here even before that big influx of Italians in the 1880s when when the new immigration.
They were
one of the
pioneers
early,
in a sense.
Pioneers, right?
In a sense, yeah. The early part of that mass migration. Then they went back. One, and they went back. Then they came back again. When she was 15, they came back. So in 1900. Then she got married right away to my grandfather. And,
were there any other adults that, other than family, were there any other adults that had a significant impact on your early years?
My father really was my mother for just nurturing us.
Yes.
And she had good temperament as far as there wasn't very much bile in my mother at all. She was a very loving person.
Yeah.
My father used to work 60 to 80 hours a week in his business. Wow. All right, so we didn't see much of Dad. He used to come home late, 6, 7 o'clock, and get up. He'd be in the store by 6, and he worked Sundays. He'd go in Sunday. I used to go in with him once in a while. Go in, be nobody there, the store wouldn't be open, but he had things to do, and cutting down and cleaning up. He worked very, very hard. However, whenever he had time off, which was just probably a Sunday afternoon, he would take me, this is even before my sister was born, we would go into museums. He was big on going to museums. The Museum of Art and the Metropolitan Museum of and the Museum of Natural History and the zoo and Disney films. And the Disney films, people like to talk about popularization of Disney. They was kind of snobby about it. I guess you can really take that track if you want to. But they were all classics.
Sure.
They used and so you become a lover of literature indirectly.
Morality tales.
And morality tales and lover of literature. Yeah. And then the museum trips that we used to take, they were always fascinating to me. So you grow up with a love of, they used to buy me books. Not a lot, but they used to buy me enough books. And those things stick with you.
You bet.
And my father, like I said, he was a very intolerant person.
Intolerant.
Well, you'll see in a minute. He was extremely supportive of the family, la familia, everything. Fight to the death for the family, but intolerant of all outside influences. And anything negative that would be a threat, or more morality-wise, or physical threats, naturally, and never wanted us to want for anything. So we're always well taken care of. And I used to work with him in the store, and I remember that the only people that he had a good thing to say for after they left. He was very pleasant, he was very dignified. I mean, he looked like a bank president. And he always went to, imagine a butcher with a tie, white shirt,
apron.
Always looked very, very, very neat. He looked like a bank president. But when they left, he only had good things to say about teachers. And it was uncanny. Other businessmen, police used to come in, doctors, lawyers, never had a good thing to say about them. You know, the doctors, he said, how could you make so much money on the people's most miserable moments?
Oh, gee. Oh, gosh.
You know, and lawyers, he said, you know, I don't have to talk about that. And the police with the, you know, in those days it was the Mullen report and forget about that. He used to come in, you know, wanting to, he used to talk about the protection rackets in the Bronx. He used to come in, he used to watch your store. This was the mafia.
Yes.
All right. Then he said the cops would come in the same way. They wouldn't watch his store, but they'd always see. So he didn't have much respect for those the other businessmen. Forget about. I mean, teachers are the only one he had something nice. Wow. My mother was the same way, and the reason for that is he always said, "There's no chance to be dirty. It's a clean profession. You don't dirty your hands. You don't dirty your soul."
Wow.
Now, my sister's a teacher, and I spent 32 years in education. Where could that have come from?
Right.
Right. Isn't that interesting?
It sure is. It sure is.
And so,
and how far? Where had he gone with his own
fourth
school?
grade. My mother, 8th grade. And but he always had respect for education. My grandfather on my mother's side too. I didn't know my grandfather on my father's side. My grandfather on my mother's side was into school also.
Now, clearly, that had a great part in influencing your career choice.
I didn't think it at the time. No. It did not dawn on me until years and years later.
Did you
must have been when I was maybe an administrator.
When you were what?
When I became a coordinator.
No, but I mean, when did it suddenly occur to you that I want to go into education? That's another
interesting little
story. Was that in high school or after high school?
No, it was college. I had graduated from college. That's not true either. It was my last semester at Hofstra. I was a biology major and a wide liberal arts minor. I loved it all. I loved the sciences. I loved English. I loved the literature. I loved the history. I was all enthused. I said, what am I going to do with this now? I'm not up to being a research scientist. I spent some time in the lab. It was not for me. I worked for the Department of Health, and it wasn't for me. I wasn't a proficient enough student to go into medicine or PhD or anything like that at that time. I was just liked it broad-based, but I liked everything. So I said, what am I going to do with this? I'm driving on. I used to take the same route to school every day. It was the end of Hillside Avenue to Meadowbrook Parkway. And I used to pass by Wheatley Elementary School. Now, this is a school right out of Dick and Jane. I mean, it's a 2-story building, probably built in the late 30s, early 40s. Has a big flagpole with the flag flying and the trees all around it. I used to pass it by every day, and the kids would be outside, and I'd say to myself, "Oh, what are you kidding? You'd be an elementary school teacher. I mean, you could do a little science, you do a little literature, you do a little math, you do a little history. They would be great. Why not?" So I went in, and I was going to be a psychologist. Was my other choice, and I was already applied. I had the application in. Hofstra master's degree in psychology, and for lack of a better thing to do, so I went to the admissions director. It was Mr. Sloat. And Mr. Sloat was my kind of guy. No nonsense, right down, gum chewing, wisecracking guy, young fella. Salerno, son, what's your problem? I said, look, I changed my mind. I want to reapply from psychology to the Department of Education. So, oh, I said, now I got to reapply. You have another application. I want to take my other application. He said, no, I'm not to do that. Goes to the filing cabinet. Salerno looks it up, takes it out. Said, what you want? Psychology? Education? Crosses out psychology and writes in education, takes it, moves, puts it in, says, now you've just applied for education. Yes. I said, that's it? That's it. That's the way we...
Yes.
None of this whole, going through the whole motions all over
and
again.
Another fee.
Exactly. Yeah. It was late in the season for it anyway, and I thought I'd have this big song and a dance from
the simple life.
But he taught me that bureaucracies don't have to be a bad thing. With that stood out in my mind so much. Yes. That bureaucracies don't have to be a bad thing. The people running it are everything. And positions of power can be, if you can not take it overly serious, you have a lot of leeway, you have a lot of elbow room.
There's your father's philosophy again, too, and for what he saw. By the way, what were your job? You said you worked for him in the store. What were your chores, or what did you do for him in the store?
He was a tough boss. I had the worst jobs you could do.
Like what?
Sweeping, scrubbing, doing the bathrooms, cans, fat. Those days, chickens came to you whole. Mm-hmm. So you had to chop the heads off, chop the feet off, and you'd eviscerate, you'd take all the insides out.
Feather.
No, the feathers were on.
The
feathers were off, rather. They were already off. They came to you whole.
Okay.
Everything but the feathers. And then you had pails that would be thrown in these fat pails. And nothing gets wasted, by the way. Nothing is wasted. You sell the fat. Mm-hmm. And there's two different kinds of fat. You have the chicken guts fat, and you have the suet. The suet is more expensive. You get more money for that. Mm-hmm. I had to make sure that the pails was clean. Everything had to be cleaned. Cleaning all the time. You never stop cleaning. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was, business was slow. You got the ammonia, you got the rags, you got the hot water, and you cleaned. Wow. So I was basically the porter. Yeah. I was the porter. Mm-hmm. He never wanted me to learn the trade because he knew that would be too easy for me to fall into. All right? So he never was really anxious for me to learn. Just enough to be a help in the store and to know how the money is made.
But not following his footsteps.
But he said he knew the trap that it could be set. Yes. You know, you could get into it, and then before you know it, well, I don't want to go to college. It's too easy to fall into. Not that it was a bad way of making a living, but then we're right back to where, no progress has been made yet. And he knows that business is just what he didn't want his son to be involved with. He wanted to be involved with that life. They had no respect for business. Maybe go through the litany again. No respect for business, for politicians, for lawyers, teaching. And yet he didn't push it on us. He just had a respect for the profession and as a whole, and public school also. I had no truck with Catholic school at all. He went to Catholic school for the 2 of his 4 years and absolutely thought it was horrible, horrible. And
those were in the years of a really repressive church, in the school.
And it was Irish that hated
the worst, right?
Hated the Italians, beat the hell, And in his neighborhood also, he used to. It was not an Italian neighborhood; it was mixed. And these nice Catholics that would go to school would beat up the Jews, and he hated that. The one thing he couldn't stand was having bullied, anything bullied. He used to tell me, there used to be the Hebrew, I guess some kind of a Hebrew school, and they would be the kids going to, and they had the locks, and then the rabbis would have the locks, and he said they would run up to the rabbis and pull the locks and say, "Fox in the bush, fox in the bush," and pull. And he thought it was horrible. He said, "These are the people that go to church, so you have no respect for priests either." He put that into the list. Yes. I'm telling you, it was such a no-brainer. I mean, if you thought about it, the only thing that you would get is approval for unconsciously would be becoming a teacher, right?
You have
think about it.
Now, with that as a role model, with him as a role model, and you became a parent, and you have 2 daughters of your own.
Right.
Did any of that carry over to your modeling for either your daughters or what has happened?
Maybe. I think that neither.
Was your father proud of you when you took the course that you did in education?
Oh, absolutely. He was. Absolutely. Yeah.
I sense the way you describe your daughters and what they're doing today, a good deal of fatherly pride in what.
Well, they take, like I said, they take after my wife more than they take after me. They're not as. I come from a business background. I still have a little of that in me.
Okay.
They are.
So that they don't follow.
They don't follow that. I mean, my father was in the stock market.
Uh-huh.
Business and understanding how to.
Very practical.
Yeah, but my daughters have no inclination that way whatsoever. Yeah, they're bohemian.
Okay, okay.
And more bohemian than either of us.
All right.
My wife has had a touch of that in it too.
Okay. All right. How wonderful! What a combination in the family to have all of both sides of it.
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Sometimes I think it would be better if they all became stockbrokers. All right.
That's I hear your father.
No, I'm saying, but no, he wouldn't have been too happy with. Oh, he hated them too. Forget about it. He used to tell me, he said, "Do not get." He was heavily involved. Do not get involved with the stock market.
Oh,
do not listen to anything a broker has to tell you.
Oh gosh.
Oh, he used to go into that. Oh,
okay.
He said when he first started to go into it, he had to build his own pension, not like us.
Yes.
God, we were saved from this.
Yes.
Horrible responsibility that you can make terrible mistakes.
Yeah.
When he first got into it, he didn't know anything. He was fourth grade education.
Wow.
So he had to start building, and he got involved with listening to the broker. Wow, I think some days he's going to go down there and throttle the guy, really. Give him some lousy advice. And so after a while, he started to become self-taught. He would get the Wall Street Journal and Barron's, subscribing. He would read as much as he could. And he would figure out his own way to go.
Yeah.
Because he said, and he told me, never listen to what they have. They're only selling what they want to sell. And he's a tough man. Tough man.
Do you remember any of your buddies from high school? Any of the people that you went to school with? Or did you stay in touch with any of them?
No. Mm-hmm. One guy I went to elementary school with, I met just by happenstance. He was probably one of the first. I went to third grade with him when we moved to R.O.B.S. He was the brightest kid in the class, and he's now chairman of the language department at CW Post.
Oh.
Richard Oletta.
Oh.
And we both bibliophiles. We met in that little world where it's a very small subculture. And he's the only one that I see regularly. I mean, I don't even recall if I've met. They like fell off the earth.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a normal.
Probably for a lot of people. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. It is for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Same thing.
So he's the only. I do see him, and it's interesting because he's probably one of the first friends I did make in Herrick's high school, in Herrick's public schools.
Would your earliest memories of growing up be from the Bronx, or would they be from the Hyde Park?
Sure, Bronx, and like I said, Rockaway.
But if I ask you this question, what would it be? Would it be which one of the two places would it be? If I said, describe the room where you slept as a kid.
Oh, we didn't have a room in the Bronx. We had a 3-room apartment.
Okay.
It was really a place to.
So then
sleep. So we moved in. I was 6, 7.
You remember the move out to New Hyde Park?
Yeah, wasn't that big deal?
Okay.
No, it's exciting to have a house. Yeah. A lot of land around.
Your own room?
Oh, sure.
Describe it.
It was a fairly large room. Closet, 2 windows. I had my own bed.
You decorated?
I was too young.
No. Okay.
Yeah. A lot of model airplanes, a lot of model cars. We big into. Did a lot of that stuff.
You built your own, in other words.
Yeah, we used to get the kits and put them together.
Balsa wood and
paper. No, they were plastic.
Oh, plastic.
Then we did flying. We did some airplanes with the propeller.
Yeah.
With the rubber band, and then we did some. A little bit older, we got with the motors, and we attached motors to something.
When you worked for your father, obviously he had an agenda that was forming a character here, forming a person.
Oh, it's the baptism of fire. You could survive under my father. You could do anything.
Did you would that be considered your first paying job, or was there another job after that that you were?
Anything I did after that was easy.
Okay. And what was
with the exception of one job I held, which was a worse job than working for my father. It was, I worked in the 7-Up bottling plant in Mineola. And that was horrible. That was a horror. That was
on an assembly line?
On assembly line.
What'd you do?
You put the empty bottles on that came in, then they got filled, and then they got tops put on them, and they came off. You had to take them off. It was terrible. Anybody who works in that kind of a situation better have a strong union, because they should. You can see where health and safety laws come about, why you need them. The abuse that you took was incalculable, and we were all middle class kids. I mean, we all come from families that had money.
Was that when
summer employment?
Teenager?
It was summer employment, and it was. I got fired. After a while, I became so resentful of what they were doing, I would sabotage the machines. Oh. And I was not alone. We would keep it. It's very easy to sabotage a machine in those days. You just kept the cap on. When you get the empties coming in from the outside, if you put hundreds of these bottles, you just have to leave one cap on, and it would shut the machine down. And after a while, they figured out who was doing it, because whenever I got into that particular line with I just left the cap on. They would give me a tough time. They would curse and scream at you. And if they had whips, they would use them. Mm-hmm. It was horrible. And when we went home, we still heard the bottles clinging and clanging. So there's tinnitus. You can actually develop that. I can see where that could come from. Your ears actually kept ringing in your ears the same. It was
monotonous, just
monotonous, loud, the noises. And later on, they started using earmuffs. Uh-huh. Many years later, I noticed that any of these jobs. But you can see that, ironically, my father's first job, when he dropped out of 4th grade, was working in a soda factory. Think about that, the irony there. And he said when they didn't have machines, the bottles used to come in, and he had this huge wooden tub, and he would climb on a barrel, and he would wash the soda bottles by hand and put them in boxes to be reused. So I mean,
that's interesting.
It's terrible.
Wow.
Yeah. Yes. Isn't that interesting? I mean, that was one of his jobs. Yeah. I thought that bottling job that was worse than working for him. And working for him was tough. He was very hard on me. Very hard. Didn't take. I got cut no slack. And any job except the bottling plant was easy.
Do you remember what they paid you for working in the factory?
The bottling plant?
Yeah.
I can't remember. It must have been minimum wage, whatever it was in those days, $1.25 an hour.
Yeah.
Whatever that was.
Hank, what was the family holiday that really brought your family together? Was there one family holiday that...
Christmas.
Christmas.
Oh, yeah. We used to have, go over my grandmother's, and we used to have Christmas Eve.
Yeah.
8,000 kinds of fish, none of which I liked. So we couldn't wait for midnight so we could get a hamburger. And now I would love to have that fish. I would love to have that. It was a banquet of fish.
Oh gosh,
and
when fish was affordable too.
Yeah, and fish was very affordable in those days. But we didn't like it. It was very garlicky and tasted funny with all different kinds of stuff. You kidding today? Oh, I would just love it. But the little kid, it tasted funny.
I know.
The eels, congeal, goes on and on. And remember, midnight was we couldn't wait for midnight. We would be allowed to have a hamburger. Just throw a hamburger on the...
Describe yourself as a kid. What kind of a kid were you?
Never stopped moving. Probably hyperactive by today's definition.
Your interests were books too, you mentioned?
Comic books.
Oh, really? Did you have a collection?
Oh,
whatever happened to them?
I wish I had those too.
Yes.
That and a couple of those fish dinners.
And after school, you went to work, though? After school, at any time?
No, I didn't go to work until I was a teenager.
Okay. All right. So what did you do before
12, 13, maybe 12 we started. Maybe 13. Maybe 13 I started working with my father.
And what would you have done after school as a kid before you went to
go
work?
play ball with the kids, guys. All of the local type things.
Yeah.
Just ride your bicycle.
Have you always been a morning person, or are you a night person? What do you prefer?
No, I'm a morning person. I love the mornings. I get up 6:30. Mm-hmm. Can't sleep any later than 6:30.
Is that a fact?
Yeah. I don't know why.
Mm-hmm. What's your favorite season of the year?
Well, on Long Island, it's fall because we have great weather. Spring is usually kind of weak for us. Okay. And summers, except for this summer, this is the best summer in memory.
I agree.
Cannot remember the summer.
I agree.
This nice.
Yes.
All the years I've been on the island.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a gift.
Even when they say it's going to rain, it doesn't rain.
Today was supposed to rain.
Yeah, I know.
I don't know if it's supposed to rain tonight, but it's been beautiful. But I like the fall only because the island seems to be, and I can never enjoy it because we're at work. Now, you get the most of it, right?
Yeah. Aromas that bring back memories.
Oh.
Which aromas would you that trigger?
Italian food, of course.
Yeah. Okay. Back to the education piece. I wanted to ask you if you first started school in Herrick's. You said out in New Hyde Park,
right?
And from that point on, you went where to high school?
Well, they didn't have a high school, so we went to Hempstead.
Aha.
We were bused into Hempstead.
You were busted. Okay. And so you went to Hempstead High? Is that what
Hempstead
it was?
High.
And following your graduation from Hempstead High, did I understand
I went to St. John's.
Oh, see,
I got thrown out.
You did?
Oh, yes.
After how long?
Oh, for the year.
Right.
They gave me the year. And I botched it up terribly.
And why did that come about?
Because it was more fun to hang out and to not know what you were interested in. And a lot of parties. And a lot of guys that were similar mind that just did not want to face the responsibility of college. Or they just party. And I became a tree surgeon.
You did?
Oh, yeah. I was thrown out. They wouldn't take me back. No one would take me. And must have had it written all over my face. Do not take, this guy is not college material. Beware. So I became a tree surgeon. And I worked for the Parks Department. And that was...
climbing trees with saws and cutting branches?
Right, Started out and met Mike Welch. Mike Welch we got him as summer jobs. See, the first was summer jobs, and then when I wouldn't go back, I couldn't go back. Then I stayed full time, and I went from cutting lawns with Mike. We would cut with the Toro crew, all the golf greens, the perimeters. Oh, it's just one massive day with it. You spend 5-6 hours a day just cutting lawns. But after they all went back, and I couldn't go back, then I transferred to the tree department. And loved it. I loved it. I mean, I took to it very, very, very well. It was like a natural. Wow. I don't know why.
It's hard work too.
Not after being with my father. It was just, and they were tough guys too. They were very battle-hardened bunch of people. And I was young. I became very physical. And climbing trees and cutting wood.
You're in your 20s at this point.
19.
19, okay.
I was 19. And I started a business on the side, tree surgery, because you learn on the job. You're 19, you learn things very fast. Things like that. Because it was so, there was something about climbing those trees.
Nature. That's it. You're outside.
We had elms, and we were taking down, this is the height of the Dutch elm disease epidemic. Taking down these elm trees in Glen Cove and Oyster Bay that you couldn't believe the size of them. It was immense.
200-300-year-old tree?
Oh, it must have been, I'd say easy 200, easy. They'd be as big around as 2 cafeteria tables side by side. Wow. Immense. You couldn't, arms would be like this. And it was sad.
Yes.
And they would have to take them down in order to stop the contagion.
Yes.
And these trees weren't dead when we took them down. Yeah. They were going. They were starting. You could see the leaves turning brown. And they would say, it's got to go. They'll just spread it. It was such a waste. It was such a shame. And when they broke me in, they took a ladder from the side of the truck. Must have been, 15-foot ladder or whatever, 12-foot ladder. And brought it out full length, stretched it out, put it against the tree. We just reached the crotch of the tree. just reached the crotch of the tree after being out twice. So the foreman went up first, and I was 19. Foreman went up first, and the top rung of the ladder was just beginning to get to the, so you had to leave the ladder to climb. So I saw him do it. He put both feet on the two
oh my God,
vertical posts. I saw him do it. And, the last rung was a foot below that. He says, "Okay, come on up." So he sat in the crotch of the tree. I had my rope and a belt. He had no belt and no rope on. And he says, "Okay, now come on up." I look down. He said, "Okay, climb up." And now we're both in the crotch of the tree. He says, "Give me a rope and shit." He says, "Here's what you got to throw. You got to reach the next crotch. Throw the rope into that. You wiggle it down. You put it. You pull yourself up, and you sit in that crotch. And you find another one, and you throw into there." And he stood with me the whole time. And
you're hundreds of feet off the
ground.
Well,
not 100. I would say that the total, maybe 80 feet.
Wow.
8 stories. These are huge. They went forever, these trees. And he got down then. And then he would shout directions to me. Do this, do that, go here, go there. By the end of the day, it was like I was born in that tree. That's how fast you acclimate at 19. And then you see why they want teenagers to be soldiers. Why they want to be paratroopers.
Yes.
After a while, it is amazing how you adapt.
Yeah.
And I was being trained the same time as a 35-year-old man who was laid off from the airline. He worked on he was a porter, and he got laid off. So he was being trained also. He would not get off the ladder. He had 2 kids and a wife.
Yeah.
And he climbed up the ladder and held on to it for dear life. Would not leave the ladder. Says, "Okay, I'll make you a ground man. You send up the tools and you clear away the brush that's cut. Same pay.
Yes.
Whether you're a ground man,
yes,
or you're in the tree." So, and I didn't care. I didn't resent it or anything. It was fun. After a while, it became again. You couldn't wait to get to work. And I started a business after that, and I started cutting trees on weekends and afternoons. I had my own business. The thing that changed my mind, I was working with another guy who came out of the army. He was on the tree gang also. And he wanted to go to college. And his name was Mike Murphy. And he used to pick me up every day, just carpool it. He says, "I don't know." He says, "You going to stay with this?" I said, "Well, it is. Do you feel great at the end of the day? I can see what you've done. You start a business." He said, "But you really want to do this when you're 40? 19 is one thing. You want to do this when you're 40. He says, "And think about it. How much has your vocabulary grown since you've been working?" I said, "What are you talking about?" He says, "What do we talk about when we go to work? Don't forget, you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. You want to talk about these things?" And every other word was an expletive deleted.
Of course.
And then on days when we didn't work, or when it was rainy, we would go to a bar and we'd get drunk. Which was a continuation from what I did at St. John's.
Yes.
And it was how fast we could get drunk, how cheap we could get drunk, and the guys were all, they all encouraged each other. They were all.
Yes.
And the guys were all like this, So we would go to a bar and it would be, okay, how many, a shot an hour? A shot of beer for an hour, a minute. How long can you last?
Where's Mike shots? Welch in all of this? You met him?
Mike Welch went back to college.
He went back to college.
He was going back to William and Mary's.
Okay, he was just summer guy.
He was summer. Yeah, I was with all these guys like this. They were fun.
Yeah.
But I said, "You going to do this? Look what you're doing now." And then it became the Boilermakers. I was into Boilermakers. I don't drink anything now.
Yeah.
A shot of scotch, and then it's followed by a beer chaser.
But then the moment of truth, something.
Well, he's the one who did it. Mike told me. He said,
"Okay,
this is fun now, Hank." He said, and he was 2 years older than me. He said, "What are you going to do when you're 40?
Yeah.
Just think about it. You want to do this when you're 40? I said, "Man, you got a point, Mike." So I started thinking about it because, what we were doing was, it was just It was very, let's say, basic living. Basic living. And it started the wheels turning again. I said, man, he's got a point here. Got to do something about it.
How do you explain the Hofstra connection then?
No, I went to Nassau Community.
You went to Nassau Community.
Went to Nassau Community, right. And I graduated from there, did very well. And then I went to Hofstra.
I see.
And then, I was on my way. I guess I needed the experience. But how people can influence you with just a few sentences.
You bet. Yes.
Just a few sentences.
Yes.
And him saying, it's fun when you're 19, you do this when you're 40.
Yes.
And the vocabulary, he actually brought it out.
Yeah.
Look how we talk.
Yeah.
Look what we talk about. And it started the wheels going. Yeah, he's got a point.
When the student is ready, the teacher.
My father was quiet throughout the whole. Never did. Didn't say anything. My mother was petrified every time I went to work because she knew what I had to do. And my father would say, "Leave him alone."
When you left Hofstra, did you leave with a baccalaureate or a master's degree? Or
a bachelor's.
A bachelor's degree.
Yeah, in science, right.
And obviously, then you pursued
higher
education.
Then I signed up for the psychology masters, and that's when I went to Mr. Sloat and changed it to education.
And at what point were you passing the elementary school, the Wheatley school that you?
I was like in like the last month of Hofstra before I got my degree.
I see.
Yeah, so you graduate in beginning of June, end of May. So it must have been the beginning of May.
And then it
beautiful weather.
Then it went to a whole other level. Yeah.
Yeah. Then I went to a full-time master's in education, and I was sitting in education. I took my first summer semester. I found it more difficult than the biology major that I was.
Really?
Oh yeah, because it's irrelevant. Nothing they spoke about was relevant to me.
Okay, I got
you. Talking about kids. I haven't spoken to a fifth grader since I was in fifth grade. This was my sister was in fifth grade. And this is like all
not real.
Developmental, and they're all teachers. They're going for their master. They're already teaching already, right? So what they were talking about, totally irrelevant. Could not relate to it at all. This is like making me crazy because there's no experience.
Yes.
All these people. This is a master's degree level. These people have undergraduate education degrees, student taught, and were teaching, maybe teaching for several years.
Right.
So they were like, could not what they were talking. So I was taught this. Bernie Honke was sitting over here. I only known him for a few weeks, and another person sitting over here whose name I cannot remember. I can't even remember what they look like. And I talking to him and said, I don't know how I'm going to get through this year. I mean, I really can't take these courses. I do not know what is going on. They don't speak to me. So Bernie hears this conversation. He says, well, why don't you apply for a job in my building? We have a new principal, and we need almost a whole new staff because the other principal took his staff with him. Southeast Elementary School. He said, we have a young principal, and I'll get you an appointment to, somehow we worked out. So I went for my interview, Pete Demento. I had a wonderful interview, good time.
What year would this have been?
1965.
Okay.
And I got the job either the last week in August probably was the last week in August. I got a call from, I was working in my father's store. I got the call from Pete Demento. You got yourself a job. Then the fun began.
Okay, what was the contract for that first year?
$5,700. Happy to get it.
Before taxes, of course.
Right. I was making $5,000 a year as a tree surgeon. So after 4 years of college, I had a $700 a year raise.
Okay.
I would have made as much as a tree surgeon after 4 years anyway, as a beginning teacher anyway. But I was happy. It was great. And I took to it very well.
So that's how Brentwood came into your life.
Yeah. Someone right here, sitting right next to me. Here's a conversation.
Yes. Yes.
And says, I would not have finished the year as an education major, master's degree. I did not relate. You can't relate to those practical courses unless you have.
Now, with all the training that you had for that, did that at some level prepare you for what you found when you got here? Or
what do you mean? When I went?
In other words, all of that abstract information that you were being given at the time.
I was taking courses that summer. I took 9 credits that summer, 9 or 12. I don't remember. And then I had to take more. I had to get certified.
Sure. Okay.
Right? No, Pete Demento was very good.
Okay.
Pete Demento was guided me through. He knew that I was green, but they had no choice. You're taking people who were green. I mean, you had to. They had to fill up these classrooms. You got.
I think what I'm trying to find a way to ask is that a lot of times we're teaching to kids who haven't had any experience yet to identify with the value of what we're saying, and you're describing a time in graduate school where you hadn't had the experience yet, so a lot of the stuff was flying over your head. It wasn't
missing the mark.
However, once you were in the environment,
then it started to come alive.
Did it come alive?
Absolutely,
okay.
Sure. Yeah. And I said, Pete Demento was knew that he had hired somebody green and was very active supervision.
Yes.
You know, he was very, very. Pete's got a lot of energy. He'd be up and down the halls in my classroom talking about things. And then.
Who did you say interviewed you? Pete Demento?
Pete Demento, right.
That was it. Do you remember any of the questions or anything from that interview?
Except it was very big exchange.
Okay.
A lot of
I would
back and forth.
Not expect any less from you.
It was a good hour, maybe over an hour. Yeah, it was good. It was good.
Okay.
And but he got me through, and then later Andy Caruso became the reading consultant in that building for the following year. And he was good at supervising, bringing you along. Mm-hmm. I had very good supervision. Mm-hmm. We didn't flounder. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there was a lot of enthusiasm for what I was doing too. So it helped, I guess, the good marriage. Let's say the good marriage between the novice teacher and the supervisor.
Would that describe your first impression of those beginning years here? That it was a good marriage. That it was
good. It was a good marriage from the very beginning. Yeah, it was. Didn't have any bad vibes.
So what did you teach then? What were you doing? What was your job?
5th grade.
Okay. And biology?
No, 5th grade. Teach everything.
Oh, 5th grade. Oh, that's right. I'm thinking of high school terms.
You could be Renaissance man.
Oh, yeah. Forgive me. Sure.
You can
see. That's my limitation. Thinking about
science.
Yes.
Math,
yes.
Social things.
Wow.
That's what the whole idea was. You can go and get the whole panorama before.
Outside of your full classroom responsibility, were you involved in other activities? Were there other things?
I was going for my, finishing up my certification, and working night school too.
You were?
Yeah. I used to work out. The night school was teaching adult education.
It's hard to imagine today with the state raising the bar what those new restrictions or requirements are going to do to young teachers just coming on the job.
Yeah, I think I was just lucky. I think the district was lucky that I didn't ruin a lot of kids along the way because they didn't know any better. But I had a good supervisor who let it was a lot of luck. I mean, a lot of goodwill and a lot of luck, because I could see you could take in people that could really do damage if they're not prepared to work with children.
Sure.
And I look back on it now and I think, oh, gee, what is that? Things that could have happened. Yeah. But like I said, Pete was a proactive supervisor and didn't let things get too far. A lot of people don't like that. A lot of people.
But that's the key, though. I think that is an important key to. I mean, the supervisory skills.
Yeah, the thing about Pete is that he was like the world's record for being a principal for longevity. I think it was 38 years he was a principal.
Really?
Something ridiculous. Oh yeah. No, I think it was 38 years. 36 years. I think he was a principal. Pete never lost it. Pete was always energetic all the way through. So a lot of people can't take a lot of proact. I liked it because you would do something, and if it were half cocked, you would be told it was half cocked, and maybe you'd be challenged to come up with a defense for it, and you have to modify it. If someone just lets you just carry on, you'd be doing the wrong thing. A lot of people get discouraged about that. They feel that. Sort of cut you off at the end. That's not true.
Okay.
A good supervisor makes you feel like you want to do things.
Yes.
And if you're going to be challenged, that's good for you. You should be able to defend what you're doing and to rethink it. So it worked out well.
The responsibility of a teacher, the job description, as it were, is clearly defined. But then there's your own description of your purpose at that time. And then through subsequent positions that you have held in the district and other jobs that you've done, what has been your purpose, self-defined?
Purpose for
your purpose. Why are you there? What is your job? How did you define your purpose? Can you do that?
Well, I always thought that an education, providing education for someone is an empowerment of the person. You're giving them tools. Maybe these tools are invisible. It's not like the tools of cutting a tree down, but they're there, and you're giving them power. You're empowering them. Without education, you're inferior to your environment. With education, you gain mastery over your environment. It's almost education for power, in a sense, which I hate to think of, but that's what it is. And when you work in a community like Brentwood, you realize that that your clientele is in need of empowerment, and everything you can do to empower them and make life so they get on top of life rather than life being on top of them.
And depending upon your role, your clientele includes not just students, but also your teachers and your parents.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And I think that coming from a cushy background, and I had a cushy when I look around. I mean, I was very fortunate. Not everybody is that fortunate.
Background meaning your family and childhood, growing up,
material benefits and whatnot, opportunities. Right. That was not the norm. That's not necessarily the rule. There are a lot of people that don't have that.
Yes. And
Brentwood maybe understand that. A lot of people find themselves in unfortunate circumstances through no fault of their own. Yeah. Unlike the way I was brought up, which my father always thought that people make their own troubles. It was part of his hard-nosed view of life. And that took me a long time to realize that it's not necessarily true. Yeah. A lot of people find themselves in difficult circumstances for no fault of their own,
and for reasons beyond
their control. And we are there in a position to do something about it, to make their lives better. And that was my defining role: empowerment of the community, starting with the kids, of course, branching out, and doing whatever you could to make things better.
Now, have you been able to maintain any kind of contact, or do you hear from former students, or do you hear from?
Don't forget they were all young.
Yes, so right.
I bump into them from time to time, and I get nice things said.
That's.
I mean, maybe someday I'll get a tomato thrown at me. I'm sure it was far from winning everyone. Far from winning everyone. But the intention was that education means empowering the individual and improving their lives, and in turn improving the whole culture.
And you experienced some changes too, both in the positions that you have occupied in the district for your tenure of office. Yeah. Let's say, you've been all over the place.
I keep thinking, I want to put a positive spin on that. Hopefully, I've been all over the place because people want me
exactly
where I'm going, rather than they're putting me all over the place because they just can't wait to get rid of me from point A to C. You can look at that both ways. You know?
I guess you could.
And
the Peter principle kind of thing.
They're sending you, look, get rid of him. We can't deal with him here
not
another
in
semester.
This case. That was your early history.
You know, but I got
early
around,
part of the learning curve.
What happened? I never had a supervisor. I never had a supervisor that I didn't like. All right. And I never had a supervisor that didn't appreciate what I was doing. And that's a very rare thing. I understand. I mean, maybe not in Brentwood, but I think in the whole global picture of working for people, I was very fortunate. I mean, I worked for a lot of principals. I worked for a lot of central administrators.
When you left, when you were no longer working with Pete Demento, did you?
I worked for R.O.B.S.
Okay, but after you left him, what did you do then? Where did you? Take me along the road. Come on.
I don't think you have enough time. After Pete, I worked with R.O.B.S, and then I was a reading consultant for a number of buildings. Full-time and part-time. I worked with Bill Kerlick and Ralph Sakin, and in
the capacity of reading consultant,
Andy Levito, right? Then Al Grabowski for being a coordinator.
Uh-huh.
I worked with him very well for years. And then, of course, working with various central administrators and principals.
Like?
Guy, right? Guy gave me a big break. I got a summer sabbatical. First time around. I mean, that was very nice of him.
That was near the end of the sabbaticals, I guess.
That was the last year or next to the last year of summer
around
sabbatical.
70, was it?
I had very little funds to continue. I was going for a master's in library science. And I was doing the job as a consultant on a district level for the elementary school libraries. And it was kind of tough getting the money together to go for the post.
Always. Sure.
And I applied, and I didn't want to take the time off during the year. And I got a summer sabbatical, which I did. And the reason I got it, he said, is because I thought that I deserved it. And it was very, the people I worked for always, I felt appreciated what I did for them. So you want to do more.
Yes.
Which is another way of, another influence. You as a supervisor, you can facilitate growth. You don't have to be, that doesn't have to be adversarial. The adversarial model is very limiting. So whenever I did get into the supervisory capacity, it was take the people, just like let's do, take them from where they are, find out what their qualities are, develop their strengths. No sense in intimidating and beating them up. It just builds an animosity, and then it shrinks the spirit.
Well, after Guy's passing, and then in the, I guess,
Guy changed the entire culture of the district, by the way.
He did.
Oh yeah, that was stroke of genius how he did it. I mean, I didn't know him well enough to discuss it with him, but prior to Guy, it was an adversarial system. The whole district was built on adversarial.
Very true.
You know, it was the spring trauma of the contracts, and you had to get out there and do demonstrations. And then after Guy, it all changed. It became, you strove for agreement. And what's the old Japanese saying? Is for consensus. You strive for consensus rather than for antagonism. Now, the interesting thing is that Guy was so tough that it sort of had to take an X model to bring in a Y model. You know, it's kind of a paradox there.
Yes.
But look what he left. He left a legacy of cooperation, and I don't think that the district could have survived with an antagonism. It's too big, it's too diverse, and it's cash poor. Now you have all those factors. The district, like the bumblebee and aerodynamically, should be able to fly. This district should not succeed. It's too big, it's too poor, and it's too diverse. Yet it does. Now, why does it? Well, the culture of the district is come together. You may dislike what you have to say and what you're all about, but you're working for the betterment all the time. And you have an enlightened board. I've been very lucky to have a board that, for the most part, has been pro-education. And you have a central administration that's not antagonistic. And there's this, no matter what differences there may be, there's this striving for consensus and to get the job done, to do what's best, which is amazing. Has always been, to me, a very impressive and
sometimes almost miraculous.
Almost miraculous. I keep saying that for some reason they're able to pull rabbits out of the hat. How they do it, it's just. I remember once there was the big problem with funding, and they got Cuomo to come down here. That wasn't a helicopter. Remember that? And they put him on. They put him on. Yeah, they put him on the radio and the XBI. After it was all over, the funding went up. How'd they get him to come down to do all this? You know, and now with Les and Les Black and Mike Fasulo, now it's honed to this art form.
Yes,
and they're able to get things done in the tradition of DPH with this goodwill. I can't explain it in any other way. Hard work, being very clever, very clever,
Mm-hmm.
and a lot
Creative,
of creative,
yes.
and somehow it just comes out all right.
Yeah.
I remember people talking gloom and doom. The district is going to fall
Well,
apart.
how many years were we under austerity? And
Yeah.
a lot of it had to do with the mood of the country in the 80s, and now in the 90s, it's a different time, and
Yeah.
it's a different.
But the gloom and doom was always present. I mean, it was always
absolutely.
like sooner or later we're going to be bankrupt.
Yes. Crisis mentality. It was always
and
dealing
yet,
with one crisis.
No strikes.
Yes.
No,
right.
no,
exactly.
never
one.
No insane tax pact type
right.
boards coming
right.
in. A lot of crazies that want to break in, but they a lot of that. But somehow the good guys always seem to win. Yeah. Just
speaking of good guys, I want to go back to talking about you when after Guy did you this favor, and then you were working. You mentioned you were working with Al Grabowski. Eventually, Al Grabowski left.
Yes.
And then you were invited to.
And I got the coordinator of the library media department, instructional materials.
And following your tenure there, which you left with a lot of people loving working with you, and
I hope so.
And
maybe not
what you were able to accomplish for sure. There, I speak with some personal experience of the impact that you had. And then you were offered another opportunity.
Right. The principalship of Laurel Park, which was probably for the 1 year. Then I got sick at the end, and I had to take the good patient's way out. You know?
Okay.
But that 1 year, and I wanted it to be more than that by far. But that 1 year, for some reason, meant a lot more to me than I ever thought it would. I don't know why. Still trying to analyze that one.
What year was that, Hank? We're now in 90. We're in 98 now, so that was.
Well, it wasn't this past year. I've been retired. When did I leave? This is the summer of 98. So I left the summer of 97. So it wasn't too long ago.
So you're talking about you had been there for 2 years?
1 year.
So for 1 year. So what were you talking, 96 then?
Right. 96 to 97. Okay. September 96 to June 97. And it was a big adjustment from being on a central level to being on a building level. Big adjustment.
The world changes.
You central level, you look at the world on a horizontal. When you're in a building, you look at everything vertically.
That's a good description. Yeah. That's a good description.
Yeah. It's a big change. You see the nitty gritty close up.
Sort of like working for your father all over again, cleaning up some of the messes.
Well, yeah, but it wasn't as like I said, working with my father was nothing that hard except being abused.
I couldn't resist that. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it was working at Laurel was that you get to see people close up. Working horizontally, district wide, you see them as a mass. You know what you can do for them as a mass, and then hopefully you put out enough good programming, and it'll take, with X% of people, and next program you do will take another X%, and after a while there'll be a cumulative growth. When you're at the building level, you see individuals, how they respond, and my own kids were grown and gone by that time. I think that this was almost like being a father all over again.
Yeah.
And except you have 600 kids.
What a family.
2.
Yes.
And you see the individual needs close up.
Yes.
And
of parents and teachers as well.
Parents, everybody close up, and what you can do for them, the good things you can do. Yeah. And then you realize that what you've been doing all these years on a massive, thank God, because when you see the need, you say, well, suppose this wasn't available to them. to participate in this program, to do that program. You would have here a kid in front of you with needs and no way to meet the needs because you're only one person. But you can draw upon all these programs that were instituted at the building and at the central level and call upon to take care of the need. And you're saying, oh, a lot of districts don't have that. A lot of districts, you sink or swim with what you have in the building. That's it.
Yeah.
But seeing the impact that something could make at the building level is really impressive. You see people very hurt, and you can take away the pain, or you can start to do something to alleviate impact. And a lot of it is not found at the building. You know, it has its origins in the greater plan. And you know what? You get to appreciate what the building principal does. Because I was on the outside, I appreciate what was done at the central level. And if you're there, if you don't have either exposure, you get to devalue what the other does. You can devalue what goes on in the buildings if you're in the central levels. Yeah, think about waxing the floors and keeping the building warm. You know, something more than you know. You deep value, and if you're at the central, they just do nothings at the central. They just put just drink coffee all day or whatever. And they're both wrong. Both views are wrong.
Absolutely.
You know, without the team, with the perspective of the horizontal and the vertical.
So as the author George Land once wrote, nothing in life is ever finished, it's only interrupted. Your plans for the future were interrupted with a health emergency.
Right. And heartbreaking because I didn't finish my thing. You know what I mean? And that will always be with me, I feel. It'll always be there.
Hank, you did the right thing for you, though.
Well, I did the right thing because I was so scared at the time. It was very frightening,
and you're here.
Yeah, and I mean, I probably could have gone the other way, but it would have been scary. This was I was not being brave. This was the least frightening of the two alternatives.
Okay.
So I took that.
Okay.
And I'd like to say I'm glad I did. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, I understand.
Because it is a sense of incomplete. I can't go back to the building. I can't even go in the neighborhood. There's a feeling of just sadness.
Well, it's a grieving.
It's definitely grieving. Yeah. Definitely. And I could come here. I can go to IMC and
sure.
It's not that, but that it's just a sense of unfinished business.
Yeah.
And no way to be finished. And that's the part that hurts. It's impossible to finish.
That you can see right now.
Maybe.
Maybe. Okay. Leave the door open to possibilities.
Okay.
You never know. Did you ever have time along your career to be involved either with BTA or with BIPSO or any of the organizations that you were members of?
I did. I was more active with BIPSO in sort of a subsidiary sense. I worked on a couple of committees. I work with Charlotte and
BIPSO being the Brentwood Principals and Supervisors Association.
The big gap in my background is that I was not active in the union, and I always felt that was a deficiency on my part. I don't know why, but I never. Looking back on it now, I appreciate what they did for us all along.
Could it have possibly been limitations of time?
Either that or coming from a non-union background. My father was anti-union also.
Oh, was he?
Of course.
But your experience in the bottling company certainly.
Yeah, well, that you think would have converted me, but maybe it wasn't strong enough to undo the years of his. He was definitely anti-union. Oh. Rugged individualist, right-wing Republican before there was such a thing, you know.
Yes.
But in fact, that working in Brentwood gave me a 180-degree turn in that whole political perspective.
So your view of unions changed. Then.
I can't do without it. It's silly even to think about it.
Were you here before Brentwood even had a union teachers?
No, I was here. They were.
They already.
I'm trying to think of who was. The earlier, I think Zuckerman, Jack, was the first one I can really recall. But I think that doesn't go back to to 65. I don't know who was doing it
Dave,
versus 65.
Martz, or
And I remember Martz, that's right. I think,
Yeah.
I don't know who preceded who. But I was not really into it. I don't know why. I just, it was a blind spot. Definite deficiency in a blind spot. When I was in BIPSO, I helped Charlotte Deschamps on a couple of projects that we did. And it was only because I felt that the unions weren't being vocal enough in protecting the interests of public education. The unions were very successful in winning us very nice contracts. And coming with a nice contract and a safe environment comes a certain amount of thinking that it's going to always be this way. That I don't want to call it apathy, because it isn't apathy. It's complacence. That this is the natural order of things, when it really isn't.
Yeah.
The natural order of things in this country is not to coddle the working class. So it's a capitalist country.
Sure.
Capitalist king.
Absolutely.
And you only get from capital what you can twist out of them.
Yeah.
Very few districts like Brentwood which have a more enlightened management style. But it doesn't always have to be that. It could change like that.
Yeah.
It could change with a new administrator, a new board of education, and we're right back. So you're
ever vigilant.
And exactly.
You can't be secure.
Exactly.
At any time.
Exactly. And I thought that at the district level that we weren't being aware enough of what was going on. At the state level, we were totally blind as to what was going on. And what was going on in Washington, especially in '94, in coming with this, they call it the Revolutionary Congress of '94. I called it, this is really historically more accurate to call it Counter-Revolutionary Congress of 1994. And we just were not aware of the implications this had for public education, which I was. I mean, I was following this very, very closely. And I was on the other side when I was back in the old days. I knew what it was all about. And I saw it evolve into something that we as union members and as public employees were either blind to or almost in league with. You know, how could you be 4 people who want to cut your legs off? I mean, what is wrong with you? And I was with Charlotte, and we started to.
So then you became proactive and
writing letters and all of that and organizing. And until this day, if I read something in the paper, I start to get my heart beating, and I want to start making phone calls. In fact, I do. I called up Newsday with a couple of, and I let them have it and question them. And I called up a couple of TV stations, and when I thought that they weren't giving public education this proper view, and I wanted to call up the union here and say, what are you guys doing to fight this, Joe? And I said, you're out of it now. Let them. They know what they're doing. That's stupid. Let them. They don't need you to prod them on. But I'm very protective, because I think what we do here is very important, and we get the short end of the stick very often from the outside. Yeah, and it's unfair. When you've been in as long as I have,
the perception is more a stereotype than it is real.
When I gave my talk, when I first went to Laurel Park, I had to teach. It was the election year, presidential election, and I told them I was not going to talk politics. It says the presidential elections, '96. You're not going to hear me. I said it's not good for me. It's not good for you. It'll distract us from our tasks in front of us. All right, you can talk among yourselves all you want, but don't get me involved. I said, but I'm going to tell you where I stand in terms of where this is in public education. I am against vouchers. I'm for strong unions, and I'm for tenure. I said, that's where I stand. As a principle, that's where I stand. So, talk about strong. I'm for tenure. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. And I gave him the whole rationale why I'm for it, and why I'm against the voucher system, and why I'm for strong unions. I said, you're talking about the principal who's pro-union. because I've seen it work in this district. It works well. I said, you want to do something political? Get active with your union. Learn what's going on in Albany and what's going on in Washington. Because if you don't know what's going on, it can hurt you real bad. Mm-hmm. Get active, know who your friends are. Mm-hmm. And that's the talk I gave them. Mm-hmm. And I didn't mention another political thing until the end of and ever. That was it. I said my piece. They knew where I was coming from. And I didn't want to.
And then all of the things that you spoke of became the subject of national debate. And political fury and.
Yep. It's
and
right.
Still
is
right there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And what I find is that we don't fight enough for ourselves.
True.
And I think that's from being awarded a healthy environment and a healthy paycheck. Mm-hmm. We have become complacent, and almost in league with the people that are willing to cut our legs off. I don't that whole psychology is beyond me, and I have no patience with it whatsoever.
Change of direction here. Yeah. You have mentioned some very, very what would I say? Not risk-taking, but proactive leaders and supervisors and colleagues that you've worked with. You've mentioned several. Are there any people who you haven't mentioned that stand out in your memory as people who should be identified at this point as having...
I mean, non-Brentwood people?
No. I'm talking about Brentwood people who have taken a significant role in the district while you were here. Or perhaps they might come under the heading of simply lovable characters that you've known, people that made an impression on you that you remember for one reason or another.
You hate to say anything because if you leave anybody out, you're in trouble.
Understood. But somehow to talk in generalities misses the point. That we've got to be specific, and hopefully with all the interviews, everybody will be covered by somebody at some point.
Well,
but then again, that's up to you. You call that one. You don't.
Like I said, I've been blessed with the supervisors I've had all along.
Okay.
And I mentioned who they were. Mm-hmm. And I thought the world of the superintendents that we've had since Guy on.
Okay.
I've known them all.
We've been there, done that. That's okay.
Yeah. Okay. I'll bring up something that I think was an area that you held very, 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 very dear. Is the Maslow Toffler experience.
Oh, that's right. I wanted to ask you. I
touched on that a little bit in my career, not as much as I would like to have, but I always thought that was one of Brentwood's finest moments. Was creating that program, and a little bit I had to do with it, not the creation of it, but the support of it along the way. I found here was a teachers going above and beyond. Another example of teachers going above and beyond. They created out of ideas. They created an entire building, school, curriculum, an approach. No one was getting extra pay. No one was getting. This was done out of the sense of goodwill and making a contribution to the community. Where could you find that? That is the kind of thing that makes this district work. Is that kind of going above and beyond. Yeah. And in the face of a lot of flack.
Oh, for sure.
It wasn't done with people weren't carrying you through the streets with throwing roses in your path. And why would people do that? It's a lot of hassle. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of risk, and yet people did it around here.
Very true.
And that's probably one of the biggest examples of people going above and beyond, most dramatic, but in little ways around the district, things like that happen.
Hank, that would probably, the next question I want to ask you, my answer would be, that was one of the things that I was personally most proud of, having accomplished, at least to the extent that we were able to. If I asked that question of you, what would your answer be? What was the
something that a contribution
you were most proud of having accomplished?
I was in the library department, I was the coordinator of library media services and instruction materials. And before that, when I was the building consultant for reading in libraries, I always thought that we should be proactive in what programs we did for kids that would stretch their horizons, and would be bringing in cultural activities, authors, theater troops, that whole.
Mm-hmm.
And we had no budget. I mean, nobody was poorer than us. We did it with nothing.
Yes.
So what I would do would go out and find authors and other cultural activities that would come for nothing. And you go then with hat in hand, and I was able to get them to come. You go to a school here, go to a school there. And then I read in the paper that Hofstra was having a readers' theater. And there were students from the new school, Hofstra School of, for an alternative school that within Hofstra. And they had a readers' theater, and they got some nice coverage, and they went to a local school. So I got on the phone, and I got them to come here. And they came a number of times, and they did great work with the kids at different elementary schools. And, they had the kids participate. They took children's literature, put it into play form, had the script in hand, minimal costuming, and then they performed. And then they would have the kids come up and take parts at the very end, and they would do it. And I said, Hank, one of the reasons we're doing this, and we do it for nothing because it's part of a course, kids want to do it, and they were marvelous students. So we want to leave this with buildings. And when I show them how to do it, I said, well, how the heck are we going to do this? I said, because we have no. So that's when I met you, put you guys together. And I said, well, we can have the Maslow Toffler Readers Theater.
And Bob Primavera
got involved, and you were shown how to do it. And before you know it, we had our own reader. Didn't have to go to Hofstra, because they were starting to go under with their funding and their capabilities going out to communities. I mean, there was one for a whole island.
Yeah.
So the seedbed was starting to, we'll go to Maslow Toffler. They have the wherewithal. They could do it. They were shown how to do it. They came up with their own scripts. And they would go around from building to building and do children's theater, readers' theater, all for nothing.
That was so wonderful.
All on the, great. With the empty piggy bank, and we're still doing it.
Yes. So
I'm still bringing in things, and Joan Lang got appointed as a central administrator, and she was into the same kind of thing I was interested in. And she said, well, I got to see what more like this we got to do. So I said, well, no money. We'll try. I said, I think maybe we get PTAs to donate some money, and we can bring in Heather Forrest. There was a folk singer and folk storyteller and folklorist and whatnot. So we brought Heather in and got a couple $100. We brought her in, got a couple of $100. It was scraping for money. The austerity is facing us every year, and where could you get money? So I call up Heather, and I had to cancel an appointment because we run out of money. I said, Heather, I can't have you come. I don't know when it was, sometime in the spring. I said, we don't have. She says, well, why don't you guys participate in the new BOCES Arts and Education Funding Program? She says, and she told us the way it worked. It was district seed beds, PTAs feed into it. The district gets back its 3/4, whatever they put into it, and it just grows. So this is like, call up Joan. I said, did we hear such a thing? She says, no. So I'll go to a couple of meetings. I'll find out what it's all about. So I went to a couple of meetings at BOCES. I found out what it is. I went up to Frank Morrow, explained the situation. I need $5,000. Put it in. You'll get 3/4 of it back next year. How can you go wrong? Whatever our funding level is. We're talking pennies. So then we'll get the PTAs to support it, and they get 3/4 of that get back. Well, I think now the district is probably hitting the $200,000 mark. What they can put in for arts and education, which has come from private sources.
Yes.
But you get funded on the private donation. if it goes through the central office. You don't pay directly to the talent. You pay through the central office. Central office pays, and you get funded on that.
Oh,
All right, that's the new method of funding arts and education, and it's way up there now. I know when I left, it was over 100,000, so it must be well over that now. It's almost like a geometric progression. And bring the theater groups that come in, and the people who impersonate Abraham Lincoln and Ben Franklin. I mean, it goes on and on. I mean, it's just you can't keep up with it. There's so much going, and it's culturally important because it builds a cultural framework.
You bet.
Right? It's library related. I tell the librarians in all the buildings, bring out the books, bring out whatever's that send out so the kids see the performance. They get a little prep beforehand. They have something to read afterward. And it becomes a whole big cultural gestalt. So that, I think, was me and Joan Lang. That was our
nice legacy.
I think so. And it's something that's very visible.
Wonderful. What have you been doing? Of course, taking care of you, taking care of health concerns primarily.
Right. Avoiding aggravation.
Avoiding aggravation.
That's my hobby.
Do you have, at this point, do you have something in mind that you will like to do when you're able to set an agenda for yourself beyond that? Any goals at this point?
Yeah, I have a goal of traveling the United States. I have a slap happy book business, rare and out of print books, and I do it in a kind of a casual way.
Computer,
phone calls,
network of people.
Network of people throughout the country
and organizations that you belong to.
Exactly, organizations, shows, and things like that.
But so if anybody listening has a book that they're trying to locate,
I'll even show you how to do it. You can do it themselves. Now they can all do electronically.
Oh,
gosh. But I do it to the point of where it starts to aggravate, and then I back off.
Okay.
I mean, otherwise I would have. Why, if I'm going to aggravate myself.
Name one book that had a powerful impact on your life. Some book.
Oh, that's a good question. It's a very good question.
I'm sure there've been many of them, but single out one.
I can tell you one author.
Okay.
A whole author. Arthur Koestler.
Yes.
Now, Arthur Koestler.
Yes.
A fascinating life. Hungarian, who was very involved politically in the 30s. And with disillusion with communism, wrote the God That Failed.
God That Failed, I remember that.
Then Darkness at Noon, and he went into scientific inquiry, became a historian of science and a theoretician of science. And what Arthur Koestler taught me, he had a theory of organization, which I used in Brentwood, called hold-ons. And I've never explained this to anybody before. Maybe like Joan Lang, I think I've explained it to her once. She was doing her doctorate, and I gave her some insight into it. It was what I taught, but the vertical and the horizontal view, well, similar to that. He believes in there's a network, okay, likening to the cells of a body, that one cell does not have the entire programming for its function and is part of a whole, okay? Because once it takes on and becomes the totality and takes on a life of its total individuality, okay, becomes cancerous. It just does without any consideration for the social organism or the biological organism.
Growth out of control.
Growth out of control. Individual assertion. On the other hand, cells cannot become like every other cell, because then you have no differentiation, you have homogeneity, you have no functioning as an organism. So all of us have our role to play, depending on people on the sides of us, and below us, and above us. Taking that all into consideration, we do our part, right? Those above us have to rely on us. We have to rely on them. We rely on the people on our left, on our right, and underneath us. If any of us becomes too individualistic, they become cancerous. If they become too amorphous, they lose their identity completely. They become blobs. We all become blobs. Nothing gets done, right? So there's a dynamic tension that takes place in all of biological world as well as the social world. And then if anybody goes beyond it, they become
But it's a balance.
toxic.
It's about balance.
It's about balance. And his entire philosophy is about balance. That there is no the absolute way of behaving can cause a lot of trouble.
Yes.
Okay.
At either extreme.
As we are cursed, the human condition is that we cannot come up with a philosophy that incorporates all the phenomena. Because as soon as we think we have it, we find out that there are exceptions to the rule. And we become friends. Either we go into denial that they exist, or we have to abandon the philosophy for a whole new paradigm. All right? Thing is, he says, the human condition is such that you have to shift. That you have something you think that works, and you find that it doesn't. You got to constantly shift the paradigm to meet the new. All right? And it might take you a little bit further away than when you started. But if you hold on to it, you're going to crack.
Wow. Yeah.
And so someplace the happy medium is probably where it's all at. But it gives nobody satisfaction. There's nothing more satisfying than an absolute idea system. Absolutely. But all idea systems leak.
Yes.
And in 10 years, you want to tear your hair out because somehow it's not working.
And also become their opposite to some degree.
Exactly.
So it goes around and
so
around.
The whole Kesslerian thing, whenever I get frustrated with an idea system, I just say, well, you know what? Yeah. He's right. So, see, it's not accounting for this, that, and the other thing. Maybe you just have to move it up. And and I don't know if that's answers your question, but
close enough.
That's basically what.
I'm concerned that we want to get the last few questions answered before we run out of time here. So I'm going to kind of skip through them. Is there anything that you would like to have accomplished that you were not able to? I think you've already answered that.
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
You've talked about the changes and the threats that are facing public education already. So I don't think we have to go there. Is there anything that we haven't talked about that needs to get said before we leave this? That might include a piece of advice that you have for the younger people in the audience who have just begun a career in education, have come from all different places, all different paths that have brought them to this moment, and now they're facing their career ahead of them. I mean, that might be one of the things that you could offer, because you come with a bag of experience. You got a whole kit and caboodle of experience that you can speak from.
Work for the common good. The things that I found valuable, the union, tenure, and keeping public education funded, very important. Someone pointed out, some historian, I can't remember who it was, that no great modern civilization became great without public education. Public education preceded the entry into industrial society. That because what it is it unifies the country under some common bond, and it postpones gratification. I mean, let's face it, you have to put 12 to 16 years of schooling before you get any outcome. And if you didn't have that, you'd have to be very wealthy that you could sustain that kind of non-productiveness over the years. Or you just have to just go for the short term.
Yeah.
All right. So what we do, we are a unifying and stabilizing force in this society and an empowerment to the individual. Keep that in mind. And then any threat to that should be handled. It should not be taken for granted that this will always be, that this is a good thing that must be improved upon and must be cultivated and must be, in a sense, must be protected. Otherwise, it could be, we could be taking a step backward.
As always, I've said this to you many times in the past after we've had not as lengthy a discussion as we just had now, but I always enjoy talking with you. It's always enlightening as well as enjoyable. And
thank you.
Once again, thanks, Hank, for being with us. Thanks to whoever among us has stayed with us for the full length of this interview to partake.
God bless them.
And
Thank you. Thanks for the
continue
opportunity.
good health.